Welcome to our very first video of our series. I'm Vanessa Wadesky, and I'm here with Mr.
Tom Campbell.
That's right. And we're excited today to talk about Tom and basically who he is and what he does. Now, Tom, you came into this life very right-brained, but you felt nudged to exercise your left brain. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. I was a very right-brained child. I would chant and put myself in an altered state of consciousness, particularly if I were like in the back seat of a car on a long trip, and you know how boring that is for little children. Aren't we there yet? Every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I just go and I just start to do some chanting and go into inner space. And then when the car arrived, I would come out, and it was like hardly any time had passed at all, which was a terrible frustration for my sister, who wanted company, along the trip. But in any case, so I was a very right-brained child, which means I had holistic viewpoints, I had big picture understanding, but not so good at logical and linear thinking, more intuitive thinking. But as I got older, I knew that to do what I needed to do, whatever that was, I didn't know what it was at a young age, but whatever it was I needed to do, I needed to become more left brain.
Okay.
So I was drawn toward a career in science. I guess when I was in my middle teens, it could have been chemistry, could have been physics, but I decided physics was the one. By the time I got to college and had to pick a major, then I went to physics rather than chemistry.
And when you said you were drawn to that, was it just intuitively you felt like?
When I was really young, I had various things I wanted to do. I wanted to be an automobile mechanic because I was just getting interested in cars. Then I wanted to be an airplane pilot just because I thought that would be really cool to fly an airplane.
Right, yeah.
So I wanted to do different things. But by the time I got, to the last couple of years in high school where a career starts to be something that you need to pick, I knew I needed to be somewhere in science. And I knew that if I was going to be in science, I needed to also know math.
Right.
So I knew those things were where I wanted to go, but I found math very difficult. Logical process was not my thing.
Okay.
But I had to teach myself math because that was absolutely necessary if you're going to do science. If you're going to do physics, you need math. So I worked hard at it. And eventually, by the time I got to graduate school, math was easy.
Right.
I'd kind of figured out, when you're right brain, you keep asking these questions of, well, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean in the bigger picture?
Right.
And for math, there is no answer to that. So that kept me stumbling around with math for a long time. It wasn't until I realized that math is just logic. It's the logic of quantity, nothing else.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a big picture thing. It just is the logic of quantity. Quantity is a fundamental thing in our reality.
Right.
Quantity is everything. We look at it in terms of quantity. How heavy, how fast, how whatever. It's all quantity.
Yeah.
So in any case, once I realized it was just a self-consistent logic, and all you had to do is maintain the rules of the logic through, and you'd end up with the right answer. Instead of saying, well, what is the bigger significance of this math? How does this math fit into the larger reality?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like, well, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
It does. There is a fit. The larger reality is math-based. But again, it's just logic. So when I realized that all I had to do was apply the rules, and there wasn't anything more to it than that, then it got easy. I just learned the rules, follow the rules, and apply them without well, what does this mean? What does this rule mean?
But you had to condition yourself to think that way because you were big picture thinking.
Exactly. So I understood, probably better than most people in math, the significance behind the logic in mathematics. So when you do something simple like to know that if you multiply A times B and C times B, if you want to add those, A times B, let's say plus C times B, that's the same as A plus B, times C.
Right.
It's so these are some of the rules.
Yeah.
These are the rules of quantity, of mathematics. And I understood those pretty well. Okay. Most people in math just memorize it. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Right.
And then they plug and chug.
Yeah.
But it does say something fundamental about quantity. So I understood those. But I stopped looking for the higher meaning in the rules. And then the math got easier and easier and easier to do.
And again, you had to train yourself to think that way.
Yeah, you have to train yourself.
Because you were very big picture.
It's the way you approach the world.
Yeah.
If you're a right brain, left brain, it has to do not just with how you interpret things, but the way you approach the world, the way you find significance. And if you're looking for a deeper significance and it isn't there, then
that can be frustrating.
It's frustrating and it's hard, and I can't quite do this because in my mind, it's not just about getting the right answer.
It's about understanding how it all works together.
How that all works together.
Yeah. So you came into this reality just being very right-brained, and then you felt nudged to train your left brain, exercise your left brain. Now, because you came into this reality very right-brained, there's this rumor going around. And the rumor is, have you heard of Sri Yukteswar? Sri Yukteswar?
Oh, yes, Yukteswar.
Yeah.
In
Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yogi by
Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yeah, Yogananda.
Yeah.
I have heard of that.
Okay. So he was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda. And the rumor that's going around, people are saying, is that you're actually the reincarnation of Sri Yukteswar. That's the rumor that's going around.
Well, interesting rumor.
That's what I say. It's an interesting rumor. What's interesting about you too is that when you were a child, you had these unusual experiences, journeying out of body, right? And these happened for you up until you were about the age of?
About 7.
About 7. And then they stopped. Why did they just stop?
Well, a couple of entities came to me when I was maybe 5 and took me out of body, talked to me, took me out of body, and they came back then the next night, the next night, the next night. So I played with it. I got out, I flew around, around the yards, the territory I was used to, as a 5-year-old. I could go through walls, I could go through bushes.
Nice.
I could.
Fun.
Yeah, it's just fun. So when you're 5 years old, you play.
Yeah.
So I played with it.
And how did you know it was, did you think it was your imagination, or how did you process that information?
Well, to me, it was sort of like a dream, in the sense that, I go to bed and then this stuff happens. So I process it sort of like a dream. And when you're in a dream, you don't think that you're dreaming.
Right.
You process it as actual reality.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So it was like that, except I knew, I don't know exactly how I knew, but I knew that it wasn't a dream. It was different than a dream, because when I dream, the dream is usually, I'm at the center of it. When you dream, it's your dream, and you're kind of the main character in the dream, and everything else is peripheral to you and your choices. But in this case, it wasn't. It was these two entities came. They were in charge. I was just along for the ride, and I was having fun, but it was something I couldn't do without them. So it was a thing I could only do when they enabled me to do it.
I see. Okay.
So I wanted very much to be in charge of it so I could do it myself. And so I asked them to teach me. Yeah. And they said, nah, you wouldn't like it. Oh. You wouldn't like it. The process is, it's not all that, fun. So I took that for a while, and then I pestered them more, teach me.
Come on, please.
So they said, okay, we will. And I immediately went into from just being awake, lying in bed, I went into a pulsation state. And the pulsation state started out easy, but then got really violent.
Oh.
So when it got really, really violent, I said, okay, you're right.
I've had enough.
I've had enough.
Stop it.
You can stay in charge, but I didn't really like that outcome. But it stayed that way for a while. And then after I had been going out of body with them, doing things, that they put me in like school. So they'd come, at first I just played. They wanted to get me interested. After I played and was interested, then it was, well, try to use it for this, try to use it for that, No, focus your mind, I was told.
Oh, wow.
And after I'd been in school a while, they then did decide to teach me.
Oh, how to do it on your own.
They teach me how to do it on my own, but they didn't want to do that
right away. Yeah.
So they did teach me how to do it on my own. And it was interesting because while I was, pre-7, 5 and 6, when I would go out of body, after I'd been through some of that schooling, it was more like I was an adult. Well, at least a 5-year-old's view of what an adult is.
Yeah.
It was different.
Right.
It wasn't like being 5. It was like being, 18 or 20 or 25 or something.
Like,
in my mind, it was
an adult, yeah.
It was like an adult.
Like you had adult choices you could make?
Yes, and I had adult attitudes, and it wasn't so much about me. When you're a child, you're kind of at the center of your world.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about me.
Oh, interesting.
And yes, I had choices that I could make, and the learning, I had to focus and pay attention. And a 5-year-old doesn't focus and pay attention very long.
No.
They've got a very short attention span,
That's right.
measured in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I would work for hours and have attention, so I was acting and feeling very much like a young adult.
Right. When you were in this altered state of consciousness.
And then when I'd come back, I'd go from that adult state back to a 5-year-old state.
Oh, you would?
And I'd kind of examine that as I'd go back. That, well, once I got back, now I'm in my body, I'm lying in bed, and I had the viewpoint of a 5-year-old.
So you had the 5-year-old attitude came back.
Yeah, the 5-year-old attitude came back.
Oh. And so were you like observing yourself outside of yourself where you could see, like, or it was the 5-year-old that was like, oh, now I'm a 5-year-old again? Like,
it just changed. It's like you're one and then you just morph into the other one.
Oh.
Over, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds in the process of coming back.
Oh, wow.
It's like you've got one mindset and way of thinking and way of being, and then you've got another.
Wow.
So I thought that's interesting, but fun.
Yeah.
That's good. So that's what I did for a couple of years, and I did that fairly often.
Like every night?
Yeah, pretty close to every night.
And
sometimes there'd be exceptions, but pretty much every night. So that's 300, 400, 500 times that I was in and out of body. It was almost every body. So it was a lot of experience and a lot of learning. And then somewhere around 7 or so, I was told that I needed just to be the 7-year-old. I needed just to be my age. Otherwise, I would grow up strange. Because I found out very quickly that she didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't really tell my parents. I maybe did the first time or two, but you don't get a very positive reply. That's nice, dear. You had a dream. It doesn't mean anything. Forget it. And I knew that it did.
Right.
Because I was learning things and going places, and it was every night. And I got to meet and learn about these people and other things. So
you just kept it to yourself.
And I got to be an adult at night, not just a 5-year-old's perspective.
That's every kid's dream, right? Every kid wants to grow up.
It was a real thing.
Yeah.
And I gave up trying to talk about it. So it just was my thing. And I didn't share it with anybody. But I got to this point where they said that if we continue this, you're going to grow up 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and be really strange. And you're not going to fit in. It's going to be a detriment to your growth in growing up to be oddball out.
The weird kid, yeah.
The weird kid.
Yeah, so they stopped it.
they stopped it. They just said, no, we can't do that anymore. And I thought, yeah, well, right, I can do it myself.
Oh, and?
And they said, no, you can't. So they made it, they shut the door and locked it. So I couldn't do it myself.
That must have been sad.
But I could always have a communication link open. I couldn't go out of body, but I could still chat with my friends, my non-physical friends. If it were, the ones that were teaching me and so on. I still had those as mentors.
Yeah.
I could ask them questions, they'd give me answers. So I always had a link there.
Personal
and
guides.
I never really thought about it as being an odd thing. I guess I assumed that everybody had a link like that.
Because you never talked to anybody about it, so you just assumed everybody had that.
I figured, well, I don't know, I just didn't see it as being an odd thing or a unique thing.
And I suppose some kids do have those guides, and they call them their imaginary friends, right?
Yeah, these weren't imaginary friends, these were all adults.
But these were all adults.
These weren't other kids.
Right.
These were adults.
Right, yeah.
So they were somebody that you could, ask questions to if you needed a bigger picture, needed to understand something or where things were going. What was, if I do this and that, where is that going to lead? They could give you probabilities.
And they gave you reliable information.
Yes, I found out that never did they give me any answers that were not correct.
Wow.
So it was, I trusted them 100% because they were always right. Even at times where I didn't like what they said. No way, that sort of thing, and turns out they're right.
They predicted it, yeah. Wow, that's incredible. And you didn't have access to these altered states of consciousness then for the rest of your childhood. You didn't experience it again until you were in college, right? Until you discovered a Transcendental meditation course?
It wasn't college. I was in graduate school.
Oh, graduate school.
I already had a bachelor's degree. I was actually I already had a master's degree.
Oh, okay.
I was working on my PhD. And I was in school, and I walked into the physics building one morning. There's this big sign on the wall, Transcendental meditation. And, it lowers your blood pressure, it gives you, rest, and you need less sleep. And as a graduate student, particularly in experimental nuclear, you run these big, accelerators. And when those things are working, particularly the old one that we had, when it was working, you took data. You didn't say, oh, it's time to go eat dinner. Let's turn it off and we'll come back and start again. No, if your experiment was running, you ran 24 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
To get your data.
Okay.
And sometimes you'd have to have another graduate student working with you to spell you so that you could get a few hours sleep.
Right.
But that graduate student didn't really know so much what you were doing and wasn't going to be as careful with it as you would. So that means you'd get 2 or 3 hours sleep and you'd back up. And then maybe he'd spell you for another couple hours, 8 or 10 hours later.
Right.
So you had to get by on just 2 or 3 hours sleep in a day, and that might go over 3 or 4 days. And then you'd have your experiment, you'd have all your data, and then you go home and sleep for 3 days, and then you'd get back to it and start to analyze your data.
Right.
So the get by with less sleep was
calling to you.
Really calling to me.
Yeah.
And it was $25.
Oh, that's not bad.
Special for students.
Right, $25 and
because it was like hundreds of dollars for.
Oh yeah, now
people.
It's thousands of dollars for Transcendental meditation. Yeah.
But it was just $25 for students, so I learned how to meditate, and it was immediately trivial to do. It was the very first time I tried it there. Where I got my mantra, I was gone for like 45 minutes.
When you say gone?
Gone, like we were supposed to repeat the mantra for about 15 or 20 minutes, made sure we had it, and do our first meditation there. So I guess we could ask a question. And I said, okay, and I started meditating.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I wonder if my 15 minutes is up yet.
Yeah.
So I took a peek at my watch, and it was like 45 minutes had gone by.
Oh, wow.
And I only had an awareness of just a few minutes.
Holy.
So I get up and I look around, and all the people that I came in with, were all gone.
Your last foot in your chair?
They had all come and done their thing and left. So because there was quite a few people that were being inducted, all at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So that was my first experience. And then you'd meet a couple of more times after that to learn and ask questions. So we had like 4 or 5 meetings afterwards, like 1 a week, 2 a week, I don't know. And then it was done after that. But to get you going, it had that. And every time we met together, it was the same thing. You know, within seconds, I was gone and off in inner space, kind of exploring, and was unaware of time going by.
Wow. That's
That's
rare that happens because
I was already pre-programmed. I came in as a right brain.
Yeah.
I still had that right brain, but I also had the left brain. So at that point, I was developing both sides. The right side had been developed. I still was very intuitive, but now I could also do math and do physics.
And how did the meditation help you with your math and physics in this?
Well, after about a month's worth of practicing the meditation, which was easy, doing it regularly. I think we were supposed to do it 30 minutes a day.
Right.
So I did it 30 minutes a day for about a month.
Yeah.
At that time, just on a whim, I decided, because I see that I could kind of go places and see things. That was one of the things that just happened in meditation.
Yeah.
So I'm a graduate student, and one of the big difficult things in life was to debug the software you were writing.
Oh, okay.
In those days, they didn't have the nice debug code they have now, and it wasn't like, well, tell it to go run, and 3 seconds later the answer will come back, and then you can see whether it worked or not.
Yeah, it wasn't like that.
No, it wasn't like that. You didn't have any debug code unless you wrote it yourself. Mainly debug code was just print statements that you put in every so often so that you'd look back and see, well, what was the last thing that printed before it bombed?
Okay.
And then you know roughly the area in which it had trouble.
Okay.
So debug was really
slow and
dinosaur compared to today.
Right.
And you'd get only 1, maybe if you were lucky, 2 runs in a week. So you'd put your stuff into the university's computer, which was 1 computer for the entire university.
Oh my gosh.
And that computer probably was not nearly as powerful as the computer that runs your cell phone.
Holy.
Because this was in the
Back in the day.
1960s.
Right, yeah.
Computers just weren't much then.
They weren't very powerful.
So everybody was using this one computer that today was just super, super slow.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was a Burroughs, a computer that's not even made anymore.
Right. So not that efficient at pulling the data.
They had something like, I don't know, 3 or 4 kilobytes of memory, and we're really proud of that because that was more memory than most. So
Right.
they were really, we've got a great computer center. We've got 4 whole kilobytes of memory.
Right.
Kilobyte of memory is used up in a Word document.
Yeah. No kidding.
So that was it. So you put your stuff in, and they had backlogs because every student that was doing computer work in the whole university, plus all the professors who were using the computer.
So it took you like a
all
week?
had to get in line.
Like before you get your solution?
So you'd go in and you'd have to stop by a couple of days. You could buy, see if it was done. If it wasn't, you could buy in a couple of days, see if it was done.
Right.
But you'd get like 1 a week.
Okay.
And that's it. But when you're writing software, it bombs a lot in the beginning because there's errors. Particularly in these days because it was all punch cards.
Oh.
So it wasn't just the errors that you made, but sometimes the hole in the punch card would be just, a millimeter off.
Oh.
Just because of wear and tear on the card punch machine.
Right.
And if that hole wasn't lined up perfectly, that'd be an error.
So it wasn't very accurate.
And it would not tell you, it bombed because of a punch error. All you know is that code didn't work.
So then you have to do it all over again.
You'd have to do it. You'd have to look because you usually assume that it was your error.
Right.
And you'd look, if you couldn't find an error, then you go back and repunch the cards on a different card punch machine than you used.
Okay.
Because that card punch machine made errors for everybody that used it. And then, of course, the people, once they found out the card punch wasn't, they'd come in and maintenance on the card punch and get it lined back up.
So it could take like up to a month then to get the solution, right?
Yeah. So it was just, they had a room with about 10 card punchers in it, so that people could work. But yes, getting your data debugged was really a lot of trouble and took a lot of time. So I decided I would see if I couldn't find the bugs in it just by looking at it.
In altered state of
In an altered state
consciousness.
of consciousness. So I meditated. I brought up the like a printout, and I let the printout scroll by.
So just in your mind.
In my mind, I see the
up?
printout just like it was on a, like a scroll. It was like on a roller, and it would roll up, and I could see the lines of code go by, and I could make it go faster or slower. And in my mind, I said everything that isn't right is going to be in red. It'll grab my attention. So it would go by, and I'd see a red line. I go, wow, did I just make that up? Just like most people would do. And there's a red line, and I'd look at the red line, and I'd recognize it because I wrote, every line of code was something I wrote. So I was well acquainted with my software.
Yeah.
So then next time back in the office, I looked that up. Sure enough, that red line was an error.
Oh, wow.
Just a simple error, like you forgot to put I think it was semicolon at the end of the statement. Just a simple thing like that.
Yeah.
So I found them. So then I started doing it more and more.
Yeah.
And then I got pretty good at debugging my stuff.
Yeah.
Because instead of doing it in months,
I was
doing it in
like that.
Yeah.
In like seconds.
I'd get it in seconds, but I'd debug a whole. So I had like my program that I wrote was like 4 boxes of cards. Wow. The boxes were long.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me. They were long boxes. I think it was maybe 1,000 cards in a box.
Holy. That's a lot.
And that was another error you'd get. The people running the machine, they had to work with these cards.
Yeah.
So sometimes they take your cards out, and then when you put them back in the deck, they wouldn't put them in the right place, or they would confuse them with somebody else's cards.
Right, okay.
Or they'd turn them around and put them backwards.
Yeah, lots of errors, yeah.
So now you think you had a really good run, and you go running a bomb, and it may take you 2 or 3 weeks if you only got one shot a week to figure out what was wrong.
So this method that you found, meditating and finding...
It was 100 times more efficient and effective.
Okay, so then that gave you this this kind of awareness, or this knowing that, hey, there's something to this meditation.
That was like that was a huge aha moment, like a bomb going off. Oh, I thought I knew what reality was about. I'm a physicist. That's what we do, model reality. And suddenly it was like, there's a lot you don't know. If this is happening and there's no physical mechanism to explain it, that means there's a whole lot more to reality than just the physical part that I was studying.
That's right.
So that was a big mind opener, which is probably why the system,
gave me that little
to do. It's just an eye opener.
Yeah.
So after that, I was trying real hard to make a model that included more than just the physical reality, because this obviously was not a physical issue.
Yeah, there's something more going on.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't just a matter that I was like my mind was somehow affecting something else. It wasn't. I was getting data on a box of cards. Were my box of cards sending me messages? I don't think so.
Right.
So there was something else going on there that was non-physical. It wasn't the cards, the physical cards. It was something else.
Yeah.
So that was a big step.
Yeah.
Big aha moment that suddenly reality got much bigger.
And it was shortly thereafter that you met, so you were working, right? You were working, and then your boss threw you a copy.
Yeah. So I got out of grad school, went to work, got a job, and my boss tossed me a copy of Journeys Out of the Body.
And what did you think when you...
Well, I thought, this is weird, boss. Well, but the boss tells you to go read it, then you go read it. And my assessment of it was interesting if it was true. If it's true, then that would show a much bigger reality that one could experience, not just do things like gather information, but could actually experience it. But is it real? Is this guy just making it up to sell books?
Yeah.
I'm a physicist, right? That's the way we think.
Yeah.
We don't say, oh, great, solves my problem. We think very skeptically. And it was like, yeah, but how do you know?
How do you know it's real?
If that's real and it really happened the way he says, then I'm very interested because I'm trying to figure out how this reality works with this other non-physical component added to it. Mm-hmm. But we didn't know. So I told my boss that was my take on it, and he agreed with me.
Yeah.
And not long after that, a month or two after that, he says, hey, we've located Bob Monroe. His house isn't that far away, and we've called him up and made an appointment to go see him. Do you want to come?
Oh.
And I said, absolutely.
Yeah, go meet the author himself and see.
I want to go find out if this guy is making it up. Is he a con man trying to make real interesting books just to sell books and make money, or what? Mm-hmm. Well, when I met him, it was real obvious that he wasn't a con man, that he was serious, and that he wasn't just some guy trying to make money.
How do you know?
He already was well over a millionaire.
Oh, okay.
Owned a lot of stuff.
Okay, so why would he
Had a 500-acre estate with a big white house on the hill, a pond with the fish, horses running along the whiteboard fence, Virginia gentleman. So you pull into this address, this estate, and it was like, well, this guy isn't making weird books to make money.
He's legit. He's
legit.
Yeah.
He's got all the money he needs.
Yeah.
And he's printing those books because he really wants to understand what's going on. Because otherwise he'd keep it to himself. Print a book like that, it's liable to damage his career, damage his credibility.
Right.
So I knew he was a serious guy and wanted to understand this.
And you met Bob, you see that he's legit, and it was the very first day, actually, was the first day that you met him, you offered to help him create the lab, right?
Well, that first day that we met him, he took us up to the lab, quote unquote. It was just a building.
Okay.
You wouldn't have known it was anything other than a house.
Right.
It was just a small house. And he said that he had built this to be a place where we would study consciousness.
Wow, okay.
And that he hadn't done anything with it yet. It was just a building. But he was looking for some science types to ran it for him, to work on it. So Bob asked all of us. We were at this lab that he had, and it had a deck. We're all sitting out on the deck. And he looked around us, and we were all techie people. Everybody was a techie people. Where I worked, I'm a techie, so everybody else there was pretty techie too.
Right.
So he said, "Well, you guys are a bunch of scientists, so would any of you be interested in working with me here in the lab?" And
right away.
Which is interesting because I'd just been out of graduate school a little time, so the hand in the air, it's like, oh yeah, I don't have to do this anymore,
Right.
You can just say something.
You could just say, yeah, I'm in.
And Dennis Menerick, a friend of mine, his hand went up, or he said, me too. Maybe his hand didn't go up. He was a couple of years older than me, out of graduate school. And I think he stopped at graduate school and a master's. I'm not sure of that, but he was out of school a little longer than me. So Bob was going out of town and was going to be back in a few weeks. He said, well, call me up. We'll make some kind of arrangements. So that was the beginning of it. So Dennis and I started going out to see Bob Monroe, and the deal we made is, we'll help you build the lab. We can build a lot of the equipment. We'll do tests. We'll do protocols, and we'll be the guinea pigs because we want to learn to do what you do.
You wanted to learn how to go out of body.
We wanted to verify that it was a real thing for ourselves. We didn't want to just have Bob telling us about what he did. If it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So we wanted the experience.
Right.
So we said, we'll come out and we'll spend time building if you will try to help us go out of body.
Okay.
And he said, all right. So we'd go up and we'd work for an hour or two. We built, GSR meters that had on all the booths of the lab, and we were doing that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then he'd come up and he would teach us. He had his own little sounds that he did, a little sound generator, and he'd put us in and went through his program. It started with body relaxation and this, and now you're someplace else. So
he would guide you through a meditation?
It'd be like a guided meditation, yeah.
And you were experiencing these altered states?
We'd experienced both of us, would experience the altered states. Dennis was a little faster picking it up than
Oh,
I
really?
was.
Oh.
He got to some of the phenomena sooner, but when I got to them, I generally, engineers just want to do it. They're implementers, not theorists. So I wanted to understand how it works. So as I would do these things, I'd back off, change a variable, do it again, see what difference that would make. So my approach was probably more thorough, but a lot slower.
Oh, I see.
Than his. He just wanted to experience it. I wanted to understand it. So we went out to Bob's somewhere between 15, 20 hours a week.
Oh, wow.
Almost every evening.
Holy.
We'd go out there and we'd stay till, I don't know. We usually didn't get home until maybe 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, my gosh. And you were out there exploring altered states?
We'd go out right after dinner, so by 7.
Yeah.
7:30, we were there, and we'd get home 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock.
And meanwhile, you had a full-time career and a family that you were raising.
Right.
Wow. You must have been, how did you do that all? How did you establish, because you helped to create the Monroe Institute then, and while you were doing this, you were raising a family and you were working full-time as a physicist, and weren't you tired?
I gave up sleeping.
Really?
I gave up sleeping, yeah. I would get maybe 2 hours sleep a night.
Oh my gosh.
3 hours sleep a night. Week after week after week. You can do that for a couple of days and then crash. But I was also spending, of that time, probably half of it. So I was spending 10 hours a week in an altered state, of consciousness.
Right.
In a very deep relaxation state.
So your body was asleep.
The body was getting most of the rest it needed.
Right.
It's just the mind never quit.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay. And you did this for what, like a decade or more than a decade?
The best part of a decade. We started like in 1972, maybe 71 or 72, early 70s. And by pretty close to 80, we were starting to
wind down?
To wind down.
Why did you decide to wind down and then go on a different path?
Because after Dennis found the binaural beat technology and we tried it and it worked really well.
Yeah.
And we ran lots and lots of people through just to see how it would affect them. We wouldn't tell them anything about it. Come in here, listen to this and see what happens. And we realized it was a pretty powerful way to put people in a good meditation state. And Bob put together a program and announced it among people he knew. And those people went and stirred up a whole lot of interest so that pretty soon there were hundreds and hundreds of people who wanted to come experience that program because they were learning how to go out of body.
Right.
We'd have a lot of people during a weekend program that were able to go out of body. So that got to be more of a job than it was a research position. So Dennis and I built this big audio delivery system so that 30 or 40 people could hear the audio all at the same time. This was way before cell phones, way before PCs.
Back in the 70s.
Way before portable, things like that were available. So we just had an audio source that had a lot of watts to it, and we'd split it, 40 ways. People were lying down with this audio distribution system running on a cord right up between them, and then there'd be people lying out on this side, people, bring your air mattress, kind of thing.
Wow.
So we'd get a conference room and get the tables and chairs out, and then
lay down?
Then we have 40 people in there that were all with their own air mattresses, and that's how we did the first events. But pretty soon we were flying to Chicago and to LA and to Boston
and you never intended this to be your job. You were just
no.
Okay.
This was just research that we were learning.
So when it got
when it got to be that we were now trainers, and almost every other weekend or so we were flying someplace. We still had been coming out to the lab. We still had jobs. We still had families, and now we were trainers. It's just too much.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just too much. So both
So
of us
you left.
just said, well, we'll help you train some other trainers, but we need to.
Right, and
We need to go back home.
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and that was too much for you guys. So you decided to stop that, and you left the Monroe Institute, but you continued on your own to study altered states of consciousness.
Yeah. And I still was connected to Bob and his group. Now, after Dennis and I left, Bob had acquired new land. That's what he called it, the new land.
Oh, okay.
And he got that in a blind real estate swap in a course that he was in.
Nice.
He got the new land. He decided that there was enough interest in it that it would make a business. He was a businessman.
Right.
So he said, oh, this is going to make a business. So he started to build
the Monroe Institute that is today.
He incorporated as a TMI. See, it wasn't TMI when we were there. The TMI didn't exist yet.
Yeah, okay.
The Monroe Institute. We just went to the lab out at Bob's house.
Yeah, okay,
It wasn't
the Monroe, the official Monroe Institute, right?
That all started
later,
after Dennis and I had been the trainers, and then he had some other people doing training, and he realized there's a lot of people who wanted to do this. So he built a lab and set that whole.
And then you went on to do your own thing, where you continued working as a physicist. You were contracted out by NASA.
Right. I moved out of that area.
You moved out of that area.
I moved, like 600 miles away, so it wasn't something I was going to do on weekends anymore.
Right.
But I was still on the board of advisors.
Board of directors?
Board of advisors, board of directors, something like that. The people who help guide the Monroe Institute.
Oh, okay.
It was a nonprofit corporation, and nonprofits have board of directors, and they make most of the decisions.
So you stayed on for how long?
So we'd have board of director meetings like once a year or so. So I would go up to
the Monroe Institute,
and we'd have sometimes there'd be a little program of some sort, but mostly we would just have board meetings.
Okay.
And once I went to a professional seminar.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Where I gave a talk.
Oh.
So I still kind of had touch with the place until after Bob died.
Okay, so when Bob died.
When Bob died, then I was kind of done there because Bob not only was a teacher and a mentor, but he was a friend as well. So when he died, and Nancy Lee, his stepdaughter, she took another job too. She went into the publishing business and worked with one of the major publishers to do something. So all the people that I'd kind of grew up with at Monroe's house,
they were
all going their own way.
Yeah. Okay.
It was changing into a new thing. Now it was a corporation, it was a business, and kind of the old guard stepped aside and let the business flourish.
Right, okay. And so then you were on your own, doing your own thing, working as a professional, and obviously raising your family, and then still continuing to study altered states of consciousness?
Still trying to figure out how does this thing work. That was my job. Dennis kind of led the building the equipment thing because he's an engineer. He's a double E. And my job was to try to figure out some theory, some understanding of what was going on. So we had hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours in out of body.
Right.
We had tons and tons of evidential data, remote viewing, checking to see if we got targets right, of reading future headlines, numbers that were put on the blackboard, after we were in our booths, a trip that we made together. We had all this evidential stuff. So intellectually, we knew it was real. But it wasn't until each of us had kind of a seminal event there that we stopped asking, is it real?
Right.
We knew it was real, but we didn't have a clue of how it worked, why it was that way. We read Seth Speaks because we had heard that he had a description of a model or so on. And Seth, we thought, generally had good ideas, but on the details he was pretty vague. And some of his ideas seemed just a little what, a little
out there?
A little out there,
Or
something that we didn't, we read a lot of his and said, well, that could make sense. Seth said this is a multi-dimensional reality. Well, we said, okay, that fits, we find that it is, but he didn't really define what a dimension was.
Right, okay.
You see, things like that, so details are missing.
Yes.
So it's kind of good, but it's kind of airy and not too, it's not
Grounded in logic.
Not too logical necessarily. It was just him stating it. So even though he had a model, it was not a good scientific model.
So you set out to create you set out to create your own scientific model.
I set out, basically my idea was, out of all the time that I spent at Monroe's, I had gotten a bunch of facts. All the time Dennis and I did things out there. I came up with a set of facts that I know reality is this way because I can do these things. I can go to these places and I can go back. It's totally reproducible. I can do it at will.
It's dependable.
It's very dependable, so I know it's a real thing. Besides, Dennis can do it too, and so could 20 other people. So it was a real thing. But then there's problems like, but is it always the same every time? And can you always do it? And it's like, well, actually, no. It's like sometimes, like if I'm stressed or I'm thinking about other things, it doesn't work out too well. So I knew it had to do with mind. I knew it was basically consciousness that we were talking about. So I wanted to understand consciousness. How did consciousness work? So I had all these facts about consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental. Our physical reality is not, because I could do things in consciousness that would affect the physical reality. But I couldn't do things in the physical reality that affected consciousness.
Right.
Therefore, consciousness is fundamental, and the physical reality is a derivative of consciousness. The causality flowed from consciousness to the physical, but not the other way.
Right.
So you had consciousness was causal,
And you had all these facts and all this information. And how long did it take for you to gather all this information and create My Big Toe that you had, the theory of everything?
Oh, let's see, from 1980 to 2000, 2003.
Okay.
So somewhere in that neighborhood.
So just over 20 years, yeah?
20, 25 years. And then I had to take another 5 years on top of that. So it's but let's say 25 years, and then I had to take another 5 years to write the books. So it was about 30
years.
30 years
Wow.
when I finally got to the point that I thought I understood how it worked. But then over the first 5 years or so that I had the books out there, I learned a lot. A few other things fell into place. And the science part of it fell into place. I mean, I knew that we were a subset, and that physics was a subset of metaphysics. But I didn't really know how to derive relativity and quantum mechanics, which are that's the little toe. That's Einstein's little toe. How do we derive quantum mechanics and relativity from one overarching understanding? That's what Einstein called a toe. And the physicists, that's what they mean when they talk about a theory of everything, a toe. So it was a couple of years after the books were published that I found that I could derive quantum mechanics and relativity using the same principles, the same concepts that I had developed in my model of consciousness. So then the model of consciousness really became, a model of everything. So I knew that was in there someplace. I just didn't know how until then, and I figured that out. And then I was able to solve lots of paradoxes in physics, in philosophy, even in biology. Paradoxes that we know this is true because we can do the experiment and we can measure it, but we have no idea why it works that way. Then I could explain it, why it worked that way, why it had to work that way, why it couldn't work any other way. So that then was probably 2005 maybe. Something like that before that happened.
Right at the end there.
Yeah.
That's amazing.